Hey nerdy knitters! If you're a new knitter, maybe you've done a project or two or maybe three and you're ready to stretch your wings and try new knitting techniques, but you search for beginner knitting projects and there are so many available, you're not quite sure how to narrow them down. Well, we're going to do that in today's video. I'm going to show you one neat way to find projects that are appropriate for your level of knitting and how to find the right yarn and needles for the project as well. We're going to tackle that today in this video, but before we do, I just want to say, hey, I'm Tanya here at Nerdy Knitting. I'm a certified knitting instructor and a knitwear designer, and the goal of this channel is to help you become a confident, adventurous knitter. Okay, so you've worked on a few knitting projects. You know how to cast on, bind off, work the knit stitch, maybe the purl stitch, and a few other things. If not, I'm linking a video here down below that will show you some projects that you can work on for absolute beginners. But now, if you're beyond that point and you're ready to try something new, but you're not sure how to dive through all of those knitting patterns you find online, we're going to break this down. We're going to find you a pattern, and then we'll walk through how to find the right yarn and the needles at any big box local store that you have in your area. We're going to start by searching a website called Ravelry. You're going to need to set up a free account on there. Just put your email address and your name in and set up an account. Once you have that account set up, we're going to walk through how to find a pattern. Now that you've set up your new account and you're on Ravelry, you're going to click right here where it says patterns and it will bring up this page. And then you want to click on knitting to make sure that you're only bringing up knitting projects. And the next step is to choose the category you want. And you can click here to see more categories, but we're going to start, since this is for beginners, let's just do a scarf. This brings up this page, which shows some really popular scarves. Some might be easy, some might be more difficult. We want to narrow things down a little more, so we're going to search inside this category. And this brings up a lot of options. We have over 800 at the time of this recording, so we're going to narrow things down a little bit. On the left of the screen, you can see lots of choices, so we're going to set some filters here. Now, when we come down to weight, I want you to choose something that is in a bulky yarn. That means the yarn is thicker, so it'll be easier to see what you're doing, and that will narrow down some choices. And for today, you have these options for purchasing patterns and things like that, but there's lots of free things. We'll start with a free pattern. Knitting is checked, and we want to see photos, so I'm going to click yes on photos. And there's more options here, but I think we're good except for this one right down here. This is where you'll see difficulty ratings. And since we're working on beginner level patterns, let's look at patterns that are a piece of cake. So they're super easy patterns, and that gives us, oh, we can see we've just got 4 pages of patterns. That really narrowed things down. Your next step is to scroll through and just look at the patterns and pick one that you think looks interesting to you. And of course, you can go to the next page and continue looking. I think I'm going to go with this one right here. So once you've decided on your pattern, you can usually find a link. You can either download it right from Ravelry or it'll tell you it's available free somewhere else. So you can get the pattern that way and save it. Then it will have some interesting information here. Now it's a scarf, so we're not going to be worried about our gauge today, but we do want to look at the yarn they use and how much they use, and also the needle size. So you're going to make note of the needle size. This one says a US 10 or a 6mm, and the yardage that they've used in this scarf, 393 yards. We want to write that down somewhere, so we'll have it as a reference later on. And then once we have that information and we have our pattern saved, we're going to click on the suggested yarn. And this tells us a little more information about the yarn itself. There are 131 yards in one skein, and we needed 393 for our project. So if we used this recommended yarn, we'd need to get 3 skeins of it. And we have some more information here, how much one skein weighs, the stitch gauge, the needle size we should use. And what we're really interested in is this right here. We want to know the weight of the yarn. That's how thick one strand of the yarn is. And this falls in the bulky category. So I want you to make note of that. And then we can look at the fibers. This is a blend of alpaca and wool, which would be really nice scarf, but it's a scarf, so you really can use any kind of fibers you want. So we're not too concerned about that for this video either. So what you should have noted, you should have your pattern saved. You should know the size of the knitting needles you need, the yardage of the yarn you need, and the weight of the yarn. So now you're ready to take that information and head to your favorite craft store, big box store, or shop online. Now, when you head to the store, you're going to see lots of yarn, aisles, maybe a couple aisles just full of yarn. And now that we know what we need, though, we can narrow it down a little bit. You know that you're looking for bulky yarn. Yarn labels will have lots of information. It'll have the company name, the name for that particular yarn, the fiber that's included, the weight of the yarn, the weight of the actual skein, as well as what we call the standards that we use to measure the thickness. If you look at this chart here, you can see that it shows all of the different yarn weights. This doesn't refer to the weight of an actual skein. This refers to the thickness of a strand, and it can go from very, very thin to very, very bulky. You'll also find the yardage information, the weight of the actual skein, color information, everything like that. You'll see all of that on there. And what you want to look for when you're looking for your yarn, look for a fiber that you like, feel them all and see what feels nice to you. You can look at the care information if you want something really easy to care for. But remember, we're looking for something that falls into this category, the bulky category. So you're going to look for this symbol on that ball band somewhere. Now, once you've had time to squeeze all that yarn and see how soft it is, and you finally narrowed down your choices and you've picked the yarn that you want to use, you're going to look at the yardage on that label and determine how many skeins you need to buy. In our scarf example, we needed 393 yards. So you can pull out your calculator on your phone if you need to. All you need to do is divide the yardage that you need by the yardage in that skein that you're holding, and that will tell you how many skeins you need to buy to finish the project. And it's a good idea to round it up a bit to make sure that you have enough yarn for the project. Then, once you've purchased your yarn, it's time to get the needles, and we've got some stuff to discuss about these too. First off is material. Needles can be made from metal, different types of wood, plastic, even glass. There's lots of different needle types. And when you're just starting out, it's nice to try a few different material types to see what you like. Now, I recommend that you start with either plastic or wood needles because your yarn won't slide as much on those needles. And if you knit tight, you'll have to learn to loosen up. I started with wood needles and I knit really tight, and it's really hard to move those stitches across when you're tightening up all your stitches. So it'll teach you to knit looser. You don't want to knit tightly. You want to have a nice loose gauge so those stitches can slide smoothly across the needles. So something with a little bit of stickiness to hold onto the stitches and to help you have a better tension as you're knitting. The next thing to look at are the types of needles. There are double pointed needles that are pointy at both ends. They can range as short as 4 or 5 inches up to 8 inches. There are straight needles that are pointy on one end and have some sort of tip on the other to keep your stitches from sliding off the other edge. Those can be from 8 inches up to 10 or 12 or longer. And then you have circular needles, which are 2 needles that are attached by a long cord. And these also, you can get their fixed circulars where they're always attached to the cord, or you can get a set of interchangeables where you can change out the cords and the needle tips. Now, I do recommend buying a set of interchangeables, but after you've tried out different types of needles to see what type that you prefer. I started with wood needles, but now I like to use metal needles because I like my stitches to slide really smoothly. I didn't make that decision until after I had tried different types of needles to see what I liked best. One more thing to note about circular needles, you don't have to just knit things that are circular or in the round. You can knit flat back and forth in rows on those needles too. So a set of interchangeable circulars is a really nice choice because you can use them for almost all of your knitting projects. But if your scarf is narrow, you can even just get away with some double pointed needles. Your last step is to pick out your knitting needles. You can look at the pattern and see what size they recommended, and also look at the yarn label from the yarn you're going to use and see what needle size they recommend as well. They should be pretty close or similar, and for a scarf, you can choose either one. So you'll want to get some straight needles in that size or a fixed circular in that size to practice using a circular needle even for knitting flat back and forth in rows. Now that you have your pattern, you've picked out your yarn and your needles, you are ready to start your project. So cast on and get started. And my last tip is just to relax and enjoy the process. I know when you're first starting, it's so easy to be tense and really tight and pull on those stitches, but that's not any fun. Knitting should be a relaxing process. So take a breath, sit back, and enjoy it while you work through your project. And just know you're going to make mistakes. I still make mistakes all of the time. The only problem is now my mistakes are a lot bigger and messier. But those mistakes are learning opportunities and will help you grow and become a more confident, adventurous knitter. And if you're really ready to dive into your knitting and you want to learn how to count your stitches and your rows, then check out this free guide I have right here. And if you're looking for more projects that are perfect for beginners who have learned how to knit and cast on and all of the real basic things, but they're ready to take things up a notch, check out the video I've linked right here with some project ideas for you.